The fluorescent lights of Denver International Airport cast harsh shadows across the security checkpoint as travelers shuffled through the maze of rope barriers. The morning rush was in full swing, with business travelers checking watches and families corralling restless children. At checkpoint TSA agent Derek Morrison adjusted his badge and surveyed the line with the practiced eye of someone who had processed thousands of passengers over his 8-year career. That's when he noticed the man in the wheelchair approaching his station. The veteran rolled forward slowly, his right sleeve pinned neatly where his arm should have been. His left hand gripped a worn leather bag, and despite the early hour, his posture spoke of military discipline. The man's name was Staff Sergeant Michael Chun, though Morrison couldn't have cared less about the faded service dog tags barely visible beneath his collar. Well, what do we have here? Morrison called out loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Looks like we got ourselves a real-life pirate today, folks. Where's your parrot, Captain Hook? Several passengers turned to stare. A mother quickly pulled her young daughter closer, whispering for her to look away. Staff Sergeant Chin's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, rolling his wheelchair up to the checkpoint with quiet dignity. Morrison's voice grew louder, feeding off the attention. I bet you set off every metal detector from here to Miami with all that hardware. Or wait, maybe you don't set anything off anymore since you're missing half your parts. He laughed at his own joke, slapping his knee dramatically. An elderly woman in line behind Chin stepped forward. Excuse me, but that's completely inappropriate. This man clearly served our country. Morrison turned his attention to her with mock concern. Ma'am, I'm just doing my job here. Security is serious business. I need to make sure Captain Stumpy here isn't hiding anything dangerous in that empty sleeve. He reached toward Chin's pinned sleeve with exaggerated caution. Never know what tricks these guys might have up their sleeves. Well, up their sleeve, singular. The checkpoint had gone almost silent except for the distant hum of conveyor belts and the occasional crackle of radio chatter. Other TSA agents nearby had stopped their own work to watch the spectacle, some looking uncomfortable but none speaking up. Chin remained motionless, his left hand now gripping his bag handle so tightly his knuckles had gone white. You know what the best part about one-armed passengers is? Morrison continued, his voice carrying across the terminal. Half the pat-down time. Real efficiency boost for the department. Maybe we should put that in the suggestion box. He gestured toward Chin like he was presenting a circus act. Ladies and gentlemen, the amazing disappearing limb trick. Now you see it, now you don't. A businessman in an expensive suit pulled out his phone and began recording. This is completely unacceptable, he muttered. But Morrison was too caught up in his performance to notice. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Your comment helps our community grow stronger. Thanks, and let's get back to the story. What Morrison didn't know was that Staff Sergeant Michael Chun wasn't just any disabled veteran. 3 years earlier, Chun had been leading a convoy escort mission in Afghanistan when an improvised explosive device detonated directly beneath his Humvee. In the chaos that followed, as enemy fire rained down on his unit, Chin had used his body to shield 2 younger soldiers from shrapnel, losing his right arm in the process but saving both their lives. The Purple Heart wasn't the only medal in Chin's collection. The Bronze Star with Devis for Valor sat alongside a Silver Star for gallantry in action. His service record read like a handbook of military excellence: 3 combat deployments, commendations for leadership under fire, and the respect of every soldier who had served alongside him. But Chin had never been one to wear his achievements on his sleeve, literally or figuratively. As Mauricio N continued his cruel commentary, none of the bystanders could have known that Chin's former commanding officer, Colonel Sarah Williams, now worked in the Pentagon's Veterans Affairs Liaison Office. They couldn't have known that Chin's squad members, the same men whose lives he had saved, had gone on to distinguished careers throughout the military hierarchy. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was now a master sergeant training new recruits. Lieutenant Patterson had been promoted to major and worked in military intelligence. Captain Thompson now served as an aide to a 3-star general. But most importantly, they couldn't have known that Chin's sacrifice hadn't gone unnoticed at the highest levels of command. The day he lost his arm, a young captain had witnessed Chin's heroic actions. That captain was now General Patricia Hayes, Deputy Chief of Staff of the Army, and she remembered every detail of Chin's courage under fire. While Morrison continued his performance, reveling in the uncomfortable attention from passengers, Chin quietly reached into his bag with his left hand. He pulled out his phone and, With practiced efficiency, sent a simple text message to a number he rarely used. Need assistance at DN checkpoint 3. Respectful treatment would be appreciated. Mike Chin. The message reached Colonel Williams' desk at the Pentagon within seconds. Williams recognized the number immediately and felt her blood pressure spike as she read between the lines. She had been trying to convince Chun to accept a civilian contractor position with the Defense Department for months, knowing his expertise in logistics and leadership was desperately needed. The fact that he was asking for help meant something serious was happening. Williams immediately forwarded the message to Major Patterson, adding her own note. This is about Mike Chun. Drop everything. Patterson's response came back in less than 30 seconds. On it. Alerting the network. What followed was a cascade of communication that would have impressed any military communications specialist. Within 5 minutes, Patterson had contacted Master Sergeant Rodriguez, who immediately reached out to his contacts in base security. Rodriguez then called Captain Thompson, who happened to be in a meeting with General Hayes when his phone buzzed. General Hayes looked up from the briefing documents on her desk when Thompson's expression changed. Ma'am, we have a situation involving Staff Sergeant Michael Chun. You remember Staff Sergeant Chin? The general's pen stopped moving across the page. The soldier who saved Rodriguez and Patterson in Kandahar? The one who lost his arm protecting his men? Yes, ma'am. He's apparently facing some kind of harassment at Denver International Airport. TSA checkpoint. General Hayes was already standing. Get me the airport authority on the line. Now. And contact the regional TSA administrator. Tell them a 3-star general is personally interested in their employee training procedures. Back at checkpoint 3, Morrison had moved from verbal abuse to physical mockery, pretending to lose his balance and flailing his arms. Oops, got a little off balance there. Guess I'm not as coordinated as our friend here. Must be tough getting dressed in the morning with only one hand. Do you have to ask for help with your shoelaces? The crowd of witnesses had grown larger, with more passengers pulling out phones to record the incident. A young soldier in dress uniform, traveling on leave, stepped forward with obvious anger. Sir, you need to stop this right now. That man served our country. Morrison turned on the soldier with theatrical surprise. Oh, we got another one. What is this, a veterans convention? Look, G.I. Joe, I don't care if you served coffee at the base cafeteria. My job is security, and part of security is making sure everyone gets proper attention. He gestured toward Chin again. And this guy definitely gets attention wherever he goes. Hard to miss someone who's missing major body parts. The soldier's hands clenched into fists, but Chin caught his eye and gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. The discipline that had carried Chun through 3 combat deployments was still there, even in the face of such blatant disrespect. What Morrison couldn't see was the flurry of activity happening in offices and communication centers across the country. Colonel Williams had activated what veterans then called the network, the invisible web of professional relationships and mutual respect that connected military personnel across all branches and ranks. Within 15 minutes of Chin's text message, no fewer than 12 high-ranking military officials were aware of the situation at Denver International Airport. The regional TSA administrator, James Mitchell, was in the middle of reviewing quarterly security reports when his assistant burst into his office without knocking. Sir, you have an urgent call from the Pentagon. A General Hayes wants to speak with you immediately. Mitchell had never received a call from a 3-star general, and his hands were slightly shaking as he picked up the phone. This is Administrator Mitchell. General Hayes' voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Mr. Mitchell, I'm calling about an incident currently taking place at your Denver Checkpoint 3. One of your agents is apparently harassing a disabled veteran, a decorated combat veteran who lost his arm serving his country. General, I wasn't aware of any incident. Let me contact our Denver operation immediately. You have 5 minutes to resolve this situation before I make additional calls. And Mr. Mitchell? The veteran in question is personally known to me and several other senior military officials. His name is Staff Sergeant Michael Chun, and he's earned more respect in one deployment than your agent has shown in his entire career. The line went dead. Mitchell was already dialing Denver International's TSA Operations Center before he had fully processed the general's words. The operations supervisor, Linda Garcia, answered on the first ring. Garcia here. Linda, this is Mitchell. I need you to get down to Checkpoint 3 immediately. We have a situation involving Agent Morrison and a disabled veteran. Apparently, there's harassment involved, and I just got a call from the Pentagon." Garcia was already moving toward the door. "The Pentagon?" "A three-star general, Linda. Whatever Morrison is doing, shut it down now. And I mean right now." Meanwhile, at Checkpoint 3, Morrison had reached new heights of cruelty. He had convinced another TSA agent to join his performance, and the two were now pretending to help each other with tasks, making exaggerated motions about needing both hands for everything. "See, this is why teamwork is so important," Morrison announced to his growing audience. "Some jobs just require all your parts, like opening those stubborn ketchup packets at lunch, or clapping when someone does something impressive." He made a show of clapping slowly and loudly. Some people just can't fully appreciate a good performance. The businessman who had been recording approached Chin directly. "Sir, I've got all of this on video. This is completely unacceptable, and I'm posting this online the minute I get through security." Chin nodded his appreciation but remained focused on his phone. Another message had come through, this one from Colonel Williams. "Cavalry is coming. Hold your position. You've got friends in high places who remember Kandahar." At exactly that moment, the checkpoint's communication system crackled to life with unusual urgency. "All agents at Checkpoint 3, this is operations. Supervisor Garcia is en route to your location immediately. Cease all current screening activities and await further instructions." Morrison looked confused but continued his commentary. "Ooh, sounds like we got ourselves some excitement. Maybe they're sending backup to help deal with our special passenger here." What Morrison didn't realize was that Garcia wasn't the only one heading to Checkpoint 3. At the same time, a black sedan was pulling up to the airport's main entrance. The sedan carried Colonel Williams, who had caught the first military transport from Andrews Air Force Base to Denver the moment she had confirmed the situation. She wasn't alone. Major Patterson had rearranged his entire schedule to accompany her, and they had been joined by Master Sergeant Rodriguez, who had driven directly from Fort Carson when he learned what was happening to the man who had saved his life. The three of them moved through the airport with the purposeful stride of military personnel on a mission. At the same time, General Hayes had made good on her promise to make additional calls. The Secretary of Veterans Affairs office had been contacted. The airport's executive management had been alerted. The Media Relations Department at the Pentagon had been briefed in case the situation escalated to national news coverage. But most significantly, the Department of Transportation's Inspector General had been personally briefed by General Hayes about TSA agent conduct and the treatment of disabled veterans. Within an hour, Morrison's actions would be the subject of a federal investigation. Garcia arrived at Checkpoint 3 to find a crowd of passengers recording with their phones while Morrison continued his performance, completely oblivious to the storm gathering around him. She immediately moved to interrupt the situation. "Agent Morrison, step away from the checkpoint immediately." Morrison looked annoyed at the interruption. "Linda, I'm just doing my job here. This passenger requires special attention, and I'm making sure he gets it. Agent Morrison, you will step away from the checkpoint and report to my office immediately. Agent Johnson will take over this station." For the first time, Morrison seemed to sense that something was wrong. "What's going on? I haven't done anything except process a passenger." That's when Colonel Williams appeared at the checkpoint entrance, her dress blue uniform immediately commanding attention from everyone in the area. The crowd of passengers instinctively stepped back as she approached, her bearing and decorations making it clear that she was someone of significant authority. Behind her came Major Patterson and Master Sergeant Rodriguez, both in dress uniform, their combined presence creating an unmistakable aura of military precision and authority. The three of them moved in formation toward Chin's position, their synchronized steps echoing across the terminal floor. Morrison's face went pale as he realized that these weren't ordinary travelers. Who are these people?" Garcia's voice was tight, with barely controlled anger. "Agent Maury. Son, meet Colonel Sarah Williams from the Pentagon Veterans Affairs Liaison Office, Major Patterson from Military Intelligence, and Master Sergeant Rodriguez. They're here about Staff Sergeant Michael Chun." Morrison looked from the military officers to Chun, confusion and growing panic evident on his face. "I don't understand. He's just a disabled passenger. I was just doing my job." Colonel Williams stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "Agent Morrison, The man you've been humiliating for the past 20 minutes is Staff Sergeant Michael Chun, recipient of the Purple Heart, Bronze Star with Devis, and Silver Star. He lost his arm, saving the lives of his fellow soldiers in Afghanistan. She gestured toward Patterson and Rodriguez. These two men are alive today because Staff Sergeant Chun used his body as a shield to protect them from enemy fire. He didn't hesitate to sacrifice his limb to save their lives. Morrison's mouth opened and closed without sound as the full weight of his actions began to sink in. Master Sergeant Rodriguez stepped forward next. Staff Sergeant Chin is the reason I came home to my wife and children. The reason I got to see my daughter graduate from high school last year. The reason I'm standing here today instead of lying in a grave in Afghanistan. Major Patterson's voice was steady but filled with emotion. He's the reason I lived to earn my commission, to serve my country for the past 3 years, to make a difference in military intelligence. When that IED went off, he could have saved himself. Instead, he saved us. The checkpoint had gone completely silent. Other TSA agents had stopped their work entirely, and passengers throughout the area had turned to witness the confrontation. Many were still recording, but the mood had shifted from outrage at Morrison's behavior to something approaching reverence for Chun. Colonel Williams wasn't finished. Agent Morrison, your behavior today represents not just a failure of professionalism, but a complete betrayal of the values that men like Staff Sergeant Chun have sacrificed to protect. You've mocked a man who gave more for his country in one moment than you've contributed in your entire career. Morrison tried to speak, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't know. It was just. Just what? Major Patterson interrupted. Just harassment of a disabled veteran? Just cruel mockery of someone's service-connected injuries? Just entertainment at the expense of a man who earned his disabilities defending your freedom? Garcia stepped forward to address Morrison directly. Agent Morrison, you're suspended immediately pending a full investigation. Remove your badge and proceed to the administrative office to await termination proceedings. But Colonel Williams held up a hand. Actually, Mr. Morrison won't be dealing with just TSA administration. General Hayes at the Pentagon has personally ensured that this incident will be investigated by the Department of Transportation's Inspector General. The Secretary of Veterans Affairs has also been briefed about today's events. Morrison's legs seemed to give out, and he grabbed the checkpoint counter for support. Please, I made a mistake. I didn't mean. Master Sergeant Rodriguez's voice cut through Morrison's pleading. You didn't make a mistake, Agent Morrison. You made a choice. Multiple choices. You chose to mock a disabled veteran. You chose to make his sacrifice into entertainment. You chose to violate the basic respect that every person deserves, especially someone who earned his disabilities in service to his country. At that moment, Chin finally spoke, his voice quiet but clear. It's enough. The 3 military officers immediately turned their attention to Chun, their posture shifting to one of respectful attention. Chun looked directly at Morrison, who couldn't meet his eyes. Agent Morrison, I didn't serve my country so that I could demand special treatment or use my service as a weapon against others. I served because I believed in something bigger than myself. But I also didn't sacrifice my arm so that people like you could use my disability as entertainment. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. I hope that what happened here today teaches you something about respect, about dignity, and about the cost of the freedoms you enjoy every day. Most of all, I hope it teaches you that every person who passes through your checkpoint deserves to be treated with basic human decency. Morrison finally managed to look up, tears streaming down his face. Staff Sergeant Chun, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway. Chin studied Morrison's face for a long moment. Agent Morrison, forgiveness isn't something you earn through an apology after you've been caught. It's something you demonstrate through changed behavior and genuine respect for others. I hope you'll remember that in whatever job you find next. Colonel Williams turned to address the crowd of passengers who had witnessed the entire confrontation. Ladies and gentlemen, what you've seen here today is both the worst and best of human nature. The worst, in the harassment of a veteran who sacrificed for his country. The best, in Staff Sergeant Chen's continued dignity and grace under pressure. She gestured toward Chun with obvious pride. This man represents the finest traditions of military service, courage under fire, sacrifice for others, and dignity in the face of adversity. He's the kind of person who makes military service an honor rather than just a job. The crowd began to applaud, slowly at first, then building to sustained applause that echoed throughout the terminal. Passengers from other checkpoints began to notice and join in, creating a wave of recognition that spread through the entire security area. Garcia addressed the crowd through the checkpoint's public address system. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Transportation Security Administration, I want to apologize for the completely unacceptable behavior you witnessed today. This does not represent our values or our training, and immediate action is being taken to ensure this never happens again." She turned to Chen directly. "Staff Sergeant Chen, the TSA will be implementing new training procedures for all agents regarding the respectful treatment of disabled veterans. Your experience today will help ensure that other veterans receive the respect and dignity they deserve." As the immediate confrontation wound down, the long-term consequences of Morrison's actions were just beginning. Within hours, video footage of the incident had been uploaded to social media platforms, generating millions of views and widespread outrage. News outlets picked up the story, leading to national discussions about the treatment of disabled veterans and the need for better sensitivity training in federal agencies. The Department of Transportation's Inspector General launched a comprehensive investigation not just into Morrison's conduct, but into TSA training procedures nationwide. The investigation would eventually lead to mandatory sensitivity training for all TSA personnel, with specific modules focused on respectful treatment of disabled veterans and recognition of service-connected disabilities. Morrison's termination was swift and final. He would never work in federal security again, and his actions became a case study in what not to do when interacting with disabled veterans. The incident would follow him for years, making it difficult to find employment in any customer service capacity. But perhaps more importantly, Chen's dignity and grace under pressure became an inspiration to veterans and civilians alike. His response to Morrison's cruelty demonstrated the kind of character that makes military service noble: strength without aggression, dignity without arrogance, and forgiveness without weakness. In the days that followed, Chen would receive calls from veteran organizations across the country, inviting him to speak about his experiences and the importance of treating all veterans with respect. He would eventually accept a position with the Department of Veterans Affairs, working to improve services for disabled veterans and ensure that others wouldn't face the kind of treatment he had endured. The three officers who had come to his aid would remain close friends and colleagues, their bond strengthened by their shared commitment to protecting one of their own. Their response to Chen's situation demonstrated the military principle that no one fights alone, and that the brotherhood of service extends far beyond active duty. As Chen finally passed through security that day, his dignity intact and his sacrifice recognized, the passengers who had witnessed the entire incident understood that they had seen something significant. They had seen cruelty confronted by courage, ignorance challenged by honor, and one man's sacrifice properly honored by those who understood its true value. The airport checkpoint returned to normal operations, but the lesson of that day would resonate far beyond Denver International Airport. In a world where veterans sometimes feel forgotten or overlooked, Staff Sergeant Michael Chen's experience served as a reminder that their sacrifices matter, their dignity deserves protection, and their service commands respect from all who benefit from their courage.